Hey everybody, Srini Rao here from NotionEssentials.com, and this is part two of my series on managing your regular workflow inside of Notion. So yesterday in the video that I posted, I talked about the importance of identifying everything that's important in your workflow, and today what I want to talk about is how you actually go about organizing your workflow. So the metaphor that I like to use, and this is a metaphor you'll actually hear quite a bit about Notion, is really thinking of it as a digital Lego set. And where this really became apparent to me was when I recently got one of those 1,000-piece Lego sets, and I was trying to put it together in a way that most people normally do, where you just try to find the pieces. But one thing that does is it slows things down quite a bit. So it becomes really obvious very quickly that if you separate all of the pieces into various categories, then you're going to be able to actually follow through on the steps a lot faster. So rather than spending 30 minutes looking for a piece and 2 minutes putting it together, you're going to do the exact opposite, where you spend 30 seconds looking for a piece and then even less time than that following the next step in the Lego set. And Notion actually works in a really similar way, which is why I think that organizing your workflow is a lot like putting together a Lego set. Now, why do you do this? Part of the reason for that is that it creates a lot of clarity, because if you don't have Notion organized in some way, then it can be a jumbled up mess, as I've talked about in the video on managing projects. And so by putting everything into various categories and giving it structure, what you end up getting is a lot more clarity, and you're able to execute on your projects. So I want to talk about two basic structures that allow you to do this. And I talked a little bit about this inside of the project management video. I actually go quite a bit more into depth. But the core idea behind having this structure really is to basically reduce information overload, so you don't have 1,000 things competing for your attention when you go inside of your Notion workspace. And the way that I separate it is into two main categories, which are your daily tasks and your projects. So daily tasks are the things that we have to do day to day, things that we call open loops. In this case, for example, I have a due date, which you may not necessarily need, but it's something nice to be able to filter. So let's say that for example, today's task is create video for workflow number 2, which I realize we're getting a bit meta here with all of this. But so if you have that, then what we can do is we can say, video number 3. So let's say we have 2 tasks. Now, one of the nice things with tasks is that you can actually add filters as well. So let's say that we have a couple of different statuses. For example, next up is one, and Notion has some default templates, and the next status is complete. Another one is in progress. So one thing that you can do when it comes to your daily tasks is you can actually set up a filter so that basically once something is done, we can say add a filter, and we're going to call this filter status is not complete. And what you'll see is anything that had the status as not complete or the status as complete will actually disappear from here. So that's one thing that's really useful to do inside of your daily tasks. I tend to keep the daily task list fairly short, and rather than due date here, one of the other things I like to do is to actually just associate it with whatever project it is that I'm working on at the time. And you can do links to that project. I just prefer to keep it simple and say, okay, this is a project. In this case, for example, the workflow video thing would be Notion Essentials is the project that this is related to. So that way you're able to kind of associate various tasks with your daily projects. Now, obviously, this is just for managing your day-to-day, but as things get more complicated, you want to organize them into projects. And there are a couple of different ways that you can organize projects, and I talked quite a bit about that in the project management video. But I think the simplest way to create a project inside of Notion is to just do a simple table. And we'll call this project 1. Here's our task list, and we can replicate the same structure that we had before, where we have a status, and in the case of projects, the due date actually becomes a lot more important, because that way you kind of have a sense of a timeline for your project for the various tasks. And this is a structure that we pretty much use for everything when we at our other company, Unmistakable Media, manage various projects. So for example, this is the exact structure that I've used inside of Notion Essentials, which I can show you here just so you have a point of reference. So if you go back, this is my main workspace, and you can see here that I've got, again, I actually put my projects into a table here, but you can see that I have Notion Essentials as a project, and you can see here that I have, various due dates, video descriptions. You can keep adding properties. So that's actually really what makes Notion powerful in terms of organizing your workflow. So I think, after you've identified the most important parts of a project, the next thing you want to do is organize information. And I think the simplest structure to do that is really by basically going through and organizing in terms of projects and tasks. So again, like I said, we're looking at this Notion Essentials video. And you can see here that basically I've created this as a separate task within the Notion Essentials project, just so I can go through this for the sake of this video. But this is actually really a simple way to organize your workflow. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. And in part 3, we'll talk about how to execute projects using this exact structure.